A desert planet with twin suns.
His name is Boba Fett.
Boba Fett? Where?
I am Boba Fett.
Welcome back to Twin Sun Talks, folks. I'm your host, Jonah Liu. Thank you so much for listening. And welcome to our final Book of Boba Fett review and breakdown. We're going over the finale today. So, without further ado, let's dive into I Have Spoken.
I have spoken.
Alrighty, so per the usual, we're going to be starting out with our non-spoiler review, followed by full spoiler review and breakdown, and then just a review of the season, and then what I think could be coming moving forward after all that we've experienced so far. As far as my non-spoiler review goes, guys, I really can't lie. This episode was pretty underwhelming for me, as much as the last two episodes were really, really fantastic. I feel like they pulled too much focus from Boba's narrative, and the finale kind of suffered because of that. Once again, really cool beats. They were kind of cut short, and less interesting points seemed to drag on for a long time. The pacing felt kind of off. The story felt flat. As much as I was really excited for this, and as much as I really wanted to like it, I can't say this episode was anywhere near satisfying for me. I didn't hate it. Like, I think that it was a solid episode, but not a good finale at all. I just don't feel like this show quite did Boba justice. And I wish that I had more positive things to say. I do think that there were some really, really good points and some really, really good scenes. But overall, it's like a 7 out of 10 as an episode, and like a 4 or 5 out of 10 as a finale. And I say that because I expect more from finales. That's wrapping up a show. It has a lot of legwork to do, and I don't think that this one pulled through. But that being said, I don't feel like I can say too much else without giving spoilers. So this is your standard spoiler warning, spoiler warning. Let's dive into it. Okay, so first of all, Cad Bane. Cad has kind of been the talk of the town the last week, ever since he was introduced into live action. People have been pretty buzzy about it, and he was an absolute beast, I gotta say. And when he was involved, like, I think that they handled him very well, and I liked the implied history between him and Boba that was sprinkled in quite a bit, and it seems like they're kind of continuing with the story from the unfinished Clone Wars episodes where they teamed up and then ended up kind of turning on each other. I really enjoyed that, but his confrontation with Boba needed to be longer. It was so quick. I don't know, and I don't think killing Bane was necessarily like a mistake, but it felt very anticlimactic. Like, especially for people who haven't watched the Clone Wars, his character was probably like Boba in the original trilogy. Like, you don't have all this build up for him, so he's just cool, mysterious, menacing, but ultimately like very like disposable threat, kind of given nothing to do. Like, he shows up at the beginning and then the end. He doesn't do anything in the middle. I don't know. It felt kind of off to me. I'm not entirely sure what to do about that. Boba Fett. Why didn't we get the same Boba as we got in Mando Season 2? This Boba felt like almost clumsy, kind of soft and lucky, which I don't like. Funny enough, Lucky was actually his undercover name whenever he was infiltrating the Clone Cadet Brigade squad thing in the Clone Wars. But I think that he relied way too much on the people around him, and it didn't feel all that cool when he was fighting either. Like, whenever he and Din flew out of the sanctuary, I was super excited, but that standoff was pretty, I don't know, it felt very lackluster. I felt like it needed more going on, because then it was just them like back to back. It was cool to an extent, and then it just kind of turned into like, oh, okay, where's this going now? Like, the beginning of it was cool, and then it just kind of kept going, and it was kind of the same thing, more of the same thing. And honestly, I was ready for him to go absolutely ballistic on the Pikes. Like, him and Din are like backs against the wall, and I was ready for him to just charge in and take the mano-y-mano. And instead, he just kind of he gets saved again by the Freetown folks. And like, even in his fight with Bane, he kind of felt like an old man with a stiff back who happened to gain the upper hand by getting lucky, because Bane kind of slipped a little bit. Not physically slipped, but his mind slipped. I don't know, man. It felt off to me. And I held off on saying this the entire show because it was like, okay, it's coming. We're going to get it eventually. Like, we're going to get Boba as he was in Mando. And then we didn't. Like, ever. And that sucks for me. I don't know. Moving on to Bobas Posse. The mods continue to make me upset. Why we spent so much time with them, I simply could not tell you. They're very annoying and out of place, and haven't done anything to kind of earn my enjoyment. I don't know. Fennec was awesome. I like seeing her operate as a master assassin. However, I think that Boba should have been the one to take revenge against Jabba's old captains and the Pike leader at the very end. He needed to be the one to take revenge for the Tuskens and then get retribution for the captain's betrayal. I think that that would have been that would have kind of sealed the deal for me. I think that if we learned that Boba was the one that was taking all of them out, and then at the very end, the Mok Shaiz is the only one left, and then Fennec kills him. I think that's what needed to happen. But Boba killed everybody else because they were the ones that wronged him, and he was taking that into his hands. But then he pawned it off to Fennec. I don't know. It felt kind of strange. I don't know. Chrysanthemum was a beast. No complaints with Chrysanthemum. He's awesome. Then we have the droids. The droids were super cool. They're very reminiscent of like Droidicas, but kind of scaled up. I think that was the idea. Droidicas being the droids that kind of rolled around in the prequel era, and they had the personal shields and the twin blaster cannons on each arm. The issue that I had with them was that it felt like a very like safe way to have a third act conflict. And this is my issue with the action in general, is that these droids, yes, they were formidable and dangerous, but there was no direct connection to the plot or to the characters that gave them significance. They were simply there to provide a source of conflict. I think that they were cool, but the action felt kind of flat. And I think that that's because all the action in this episode felt very impersonal. There were a lot of long shootouts with very little one-on-one action, which made everything feel very stale. And that could be me. I mean, that's why I like lightsaber fights so much, is because it's so personal. It's extremely personal. You're up close in person. They're not range attacks. You are fighting blade to blade with another opponent. Even the crux of this whole episode, this whole show really, which was Bane versus Boba, was rushed through, and it felt like a box to check off. I don't know. I didn't like it. It didn't sit right with me. The Rancor was cool. I really liked the Rancor. I loved seeing it in action. Kind of almost like, it was like King Kong almost. Boba on its back was absolutely bad A, and I can't say I'm disappointed by that. That was really cool. Yeah, no complaints. Just a cool time with the Rancor. Now, let's talk about Mando. So here's the thing. Good news. The 2 episodes before the finale were absolutely amazing. The best of the season. Some of the best Star Wars content that we've gotten in a very long time. Bad news. The 2 episodes before the finale had exactly 1 scene with Boba Fett in it. And as much as I absolutely loved getting to follow Din and have some time with Luke and Grogu and Ahsoka, and don't get me wrong, hear me when I say this, those 2 episodes, episodes 5 and 6 of the show, were some of the best Star Wars that I have seen in a long time. But we needed that time to get more legwork done with Boba. This is a Boba Fett show, and we didn't get any Boba for 2 whole episodes. Spending those episodes leading up to the finale completely removed from the main protagonist and what was arguably a much better experience, I don't think that was the best move on Favreau and Rodriguez's part. It made me very excited for Mandalorian Season 3, but it left a lot to be desired from the show that we were in right now. Amazing episodes, but missed opportunities with adding more depth and giving more action to Boba, the namesake of the show. That being said, Mando getting reunited with Baby Yoda was very heartwarming. I loved seeing that. Loved seeing the I don't know. Another issue that I have, and I didn't actually write this down. I think that it would have been really good to see Mando and Baby Yoda, Grogu, kind of develop away from each other for a little bit. I feel like having them back together before season 3 of The Mandalorian even starts kind of undercuts the emotion of seeing Baby Yoda go away at the end of Mando season 2. Just because it's like, oh, but he's back. I think that it would have been really cool to see Grogu train under Luke, kind of like have a split storyline in Mando season 3, where it's split between Grogu training and Mando trying to find his way back to Mandalore. And I don't know. And then have it kind of at the very end, then they're reunited. I think that's what we should have gotten. I'm not mad because I do love their dynamic and I love Grogu, but at the same time, it just felt kind of rushed. But I mean, I still think that both of them stole the show from everybody else. I mean, and then we get to the ending. The show ends like the end of like a sitcom episode, where it's like everything is shiny and happy, and our heroes are laughing in the streets of Mos Espa. Boba doesn't mourn his refreshed grief over his Tusken family. He isn't riding the Rancor through the streets instead of being carried around on a litter. If anything, he's unsure of whether he even wants to do this anymore. Guys, I really just don't know what to say. It's once again not a bad episode in and of itself. It was just not a good finale. Not even close. Then post-credit scene. Why was that the post-credit scene? That sucked. I'm just gonna say it. That sucked. I was very disappointed by the post-credit scene. I don't care that Cobb Vanth is getting modded. You could have shown that any other time. Give us a Luke. Give us a teaser for The Mandalorian. Give us a Kenobi trailer. Anything. I don't know. It just felt off to me, which I'm not used to from Favreau. I don't know. Once again, I just want to reiterate that I really don't like complaining about this sort of stuff. That's not something that brings me joy as much as I do enjoy my I've got a bad feeling about which honestly, this was kind of one of those, but I'm not going to play the zinger because it's not an official one, but I don't know. That's about all that I have as far as the breakdown, but my review, like I said, I don't want to come across as like a hater or like toxic because I just feel like I have to be honest when I say that this episode wasn't all that it could have been, in my opinion. I think it was still solid. Not a great finale, which I've already said many times. It wasn't bad. It had cool moments, but it just felt flat. It reminded me a lot of the WandaVision finale, for those of you who watch the Marvel shows, or like the Bad Batch finale, where it's like you got all this buildup and some really cool potential for some really cool stuff, and then you get kind of a low-stakes ending with some cool enough action, where you're not really... the stakes feel low. It feels like you're just kind of riding a wave out instead of like crashing in and getting some stuff that's like really shocking and really, really entertaining to watch. Bane was underutilized. Boba was underutilized in his own show. Of course, we actually got time with him in this episode, but at the same time, I don't feel like that he was used to his full potential. I feel like there was a lot of room to have added like other bounty hunters to fill out the action a bit, rather than like split it with like the mods. I really don't like them. I was hoping that something would come along and kind of redeem them a little bit for me, but I don't like them. They're boring and out of place to me. The mods are the Power Rangers, by the way. That's what I've been calling them for a while. I try to be positive over negative when I can, but I also want to be honest and to maintain the integrity of this podcast. And unfortunately, I just wasn't a huge fan of the finale. My thoughts on the season overall. I honestly really like this show. Despite what I've been saying in this episode, I really liked it. There are moments that I squinted at it, kind of like the finale, kind of like in episode 3, but I feel like taken all together, it was very solid. As far as my ranking of the episode, I would say my top 3 are the 6th, the 5th, and the 2nd episode in that order, and then we go 1, 4, 7, 3 after that. So the 1st episode, the 4th episode, the 7th, and the 3rd. So the 6th episode, last week's, incredible. You got Luke, you got Grogu, you got Ahsoka, you got an Order 66 flashback, you got Cad Bane, top tier. Episode 5 was Mandalorian Season 3, episode -1. Episode 6 was episode 0. Awesome. Loved The Mandalorian. Loved all the stuff that we got. A little sad that we didn't get any Boba action, but hey, it was a really cool episode. Episode 2 was the time that we spent most of the time in the flashbacks, going back to the Tuskens. Awesome episode. We got to see the Pikes for the first time in live action. Super exciting. Awesome episode. Episode 1, super interesting. Loved it. Set a really good tone for it. I think that a lot of people thought it was slow, but I thought that it set a pretty cool tone. Episode 4, we get Black Chrysanthemum back in the mix. You get some interesting background on Boba and Fennec. Overall, really good time. Episode 7 was today's, the finale. Fell a little bit short, but not bad. Just didn't quite hold up to the rest of the season and didn't quite deliver in a satisfying way, in my opinion. And then episode 3 was where we were introduced to the Power Rangers, and we got some stuff with Chrysanthemum, and the Rancor, but overall, not quite my thing. Also, episode 4, we got the teaser for Mando coming in the next episode. But anyways, all that said, therein lies the issue, which is that the finale was in my bottom 2, and then my top 2 didn't even follow Boba at all. And while this show did a lot to expand on a lot of lore and did a really good job at delivering good content, the best content didn't even follow Boba. And I would say I liked the show more than Bad Batch overall. And maybe even Rebels season 1 and 2, most of 2 at least. But it doesn't even come close to the Clone Wars of The Mandalorian, honestly. That said, I'm really hoping that we get a season 2, because I think that there's a wealth of untapped potential for Boba that we can dive into. So that being said, let's dive into visions.
To continue, we need one singular vision. My vision.
So what's next? I don't know, guys. I still think that Windu would be a great antagonist for this show. I've seen a lot of people not wanting him to come back, just because it's it undercuts the significance of Anakin's turn to the dark side. It represents the fall of the Jedi. I mean, but the Jedi weren't really gone, were they? I still think that it wouldn't be out of line for him to come back. And I think, just a very brief synopsis of my thoughts, I think that he potentially met up with some maybe 10 surviving Jedi, led a last stand against the Empire and lost. And maybe this is where Grogu falls into the clutches of the Empire. And this is where he kind of loses faith in himself. And somehow, and I think that he exiles himself at that point. He's driven not mad, but he is just so consumed by grief that he takes himself out of the picture entirely, shuts himself off from the Force, and only reopens himself to the Force when Palpatine is killed and Vader dies. Even when he's cut off from the Force, he can still feel those ripples. And then he's stranded on some backwater world, but he's able to reach out through the Force, and Luke finds him, brings him back into the fold. And by the time, so he misses out on the Empire stuff. He tries his best and then fails, and kind of comes to the realization that he really only makes things worse. Leaves, comes back after the Empire is destroyed. And then Boba puts a bounty on his head. Could be interesting. That being said, I think that Boba will recruit other bounty hunters as his new lieutenants, which would be awesome. Kind of the idea of starting a family and treating his fellow bounty hunters the correct way because they're not treated with the respect that they deserve. I think that focusing on Boba and giving him the Din Djarin treatment is very much needed. Because Din, the Mandalorian, is how Boba should be. He's quiet. He's thoughtful, and he's awesome. Boba was none of those things in this season. He was awesome at times. Most of those were in flashbacks, though. He felt soft and, like I said, kind of clumsy. I did enjoy the show overall, but I think we needed more Boba. And I don't like being as negative as I was this episode, but I feel like I owe it to my listeners, to be honest. With that being said, that's about all that I have for my thoughts on this episode. Thank y'all for sticking with me through all of these reviews and breakdowns. Go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube, Twin Sun Talks Podcast. Subscribe and follow on any streaming platforms, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And follow us on Instagram at Twin Sun Talks. Stay tuned on Monday. For Valentine's Day, we're doing an episode on Jedi intimacy and attachments. So stay tuned for that. But that being said, you've taken your first steps into a larger world. May the Force be with you, and I will see y'all in the next episode. Bye, friends.